a key U.S. ally since World War II and the most important country in Latin America. But all that could change. In this special report, we look at why Brazil is strategically vital to the United States, what happens if the Chinese regime takes over, and the consequences of Washington turning a blind eye. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A wealth of resources, from critical rare earth minerals to agriculture to the largest clean water supply in the world, Brazil has it all. But it's being infiltrated by America's biggest threat, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. It could soon reach the point of no return.
China's influence in Brazil is growing fast, and this influence should worry the United States.
That influence is fourfold. First up, the upcoming elections in October.
And if we were to watch Brazil go the way of, say, Chile, which just recently voted in a kind of an anti-American regime, this could be devastating to America's national interests in our own hemisphere. And I say in our own hemisphere, and there's some obvious historic importance to the Monroe Doctrine to America's national history.
That's Captain James Fanell, former Director of Intelligence and Information Operations for the U.S. Pacific Fleet. A U.S. ally since World War II, Brazil is ideologically more aligned with the U.S. than communism. But while many countries in South America, like Peru and Argentina, have fallen, Brazil and Paraguay are still divided. They have not yet folded. But the upcoming election in October is putting some on edge.
There is a military situation also. In Latin America, Brazil possesses the largest coastline in the Atlantic Ocean. It's strategic for military reasons.
If Brazil falls under CCP rule, that has massive strategic implications for the U.S. and allies. The Chinese regime would be able to lock up the Atlantic. That's because China's military, officially called the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, already has control over space facilities in Argentina.
And we already know that China has designs and interests in the Azores and the strategic air base there at Lajes, which would allow potentially Chinese strategic bombers to fly out and fly patrols against the United States East Coast even.
But it goes beyond the Atlantic. Fanell notes the Chinese regime's strategic goals are more ambitious.
We had the commander of U.S. Africa Command in March, General Townsend, comment about his great concern about Equatorial Guinea on the west coast of Africa. So now all of a sudden, if you have both Argentina and Brazil having a pro-China outlook, and they start allowing Chinese fishing fleets, Chinese maritime militia, and then Chinese naval warships and submarines to operate in the region, all of a sudden, China now has an expanded footprint into not just the Pacific, where we're seeing them expand towards Hawaii, but now all of a sudden you're going to see them come up through the South Pacific.
From a naval perspective, the Chinese regime has its sights on controlling all strategic waterways. Rafael Fontana, Brazilian journalist and author, notes the third point is economic.
Brazil is the largest economy in Latin America. Brazil has alone more than half of the South America combined GDP. It's the greatest USA ally in the hemisphere. So Brazil is important for both trade and business.
While Brazil and China established formal diplomatic ties in 1974, the relationship didn't take off for some time. In 1993, that relationship was pushed to that of a strategic partnership. And in 2004, Brazil recognized China as a market economy. Also in 2004, it became an all-weather strategic partnership. That means China would give support in every and any condition. A few years later, in 2009, China surpassed the U.S. as Brazil's top trading partner. Today, 1/3 of the country's trade is funneled into China. But how did the Chinese regime make it happen?
The Brazilian government was blackmailed by the Chinese regime. If Brazil didn't allow Huawei to build the 5G infrastructure inside the country, China wouldn't sell coronavirus vaccines to Brazil.
Fontana details that situation in his book, Chinobyl, A Journey Through the Guts of the Communist Dictatorship. The title Chinobyl is a reference to Chernobyl, as in the CCP is a nuclear time bomb. Fontana worked as a journalist in China. After returning to Brazil, Chinese telecoms giant Huawei hired him as a PR director. Through that relationship, he got an inside look into how the regime operates.
When I was interviewed by the vice president of the communications in Brazil, I realized that he was a member of the CCP. A few days later, I attended a meeting in São Paulo, and all the top executives in the office were members of the party.
And that went further during his time abroad.
After a while, I traveled to the headquarters of Huawei in China, in the city of Shenzhen. There was no surprise. All the top positions in the company are occupied by the CCP members. And of course, the CEO, Ren Zhengfei, is himself a member of the party. Now, we can think of something here. If all the members of Huawei, the top executives, are members of the CCP, who is controlling the company? I think you have the answer.
Fontana also sheds light on how Huawei functions.
It operates as a private company when it's like building infrastructure and trying to find new clients. But of course, all the negotiation comes from the government of China. And it's really dangerous because Huawei and other big tech companies of China, they are working for the CCP purposes.
In other words, there are no private companies in China. So what does that mean for a country that's doing business with the Chinese regime?
When you bring Huawei into a country like Brazil, the most populous country in South America and the largest and the richest, you now have access to all new sorts of data that China will want to have.
Brazil and Huawei just signed a major deal earlier this year to open the first 5G city in Brazil. Part of the deal aims to realize a smart city through 5G networks. Smart cities combine technologies like networked cameras, sensors, and location services, and the rest of the Internet of Things to collect a wide variety of data in order to control things like traffic, energy usage, and crime, and to augment state power. While it's said to improve residents' lives, reports note China has used those same technologies to track and monitor ethnic minority groups with Uyghurs, which the U.S. and other countries say the Chinese regime is committing genocide against. It's an accusation the Chinese regime denies.
Brazil signing off on this new contracts with Huawei really reinforces China's digital footprint inside of Brazil. And so China is pursuing what they call digital China, where they want to digitize everything in the world and have China control all the data.
That's on top of Huawei already servicing 95% of Brazil, according to Huawei's local website. But Fanell notes this has implications beyond Brazil's borders. Going back to the election, if Brazil turns away from aligning with the U.S.,
now all of a sudden China's going to have access to all this records and interactions with the United States and the Western world. And from a military perspective, that puts the relationship between the United States and Brazil at risk, because now the United States is going to be less likely to have military engagement with Brazil out of fear that Brazil's networks are corrupted and have vulnerabilities from the PLA and the Chinese Communist Party's digital spies.
But beyond telecoms, Brazil is both the biggest country in South America, but also the biggest economy there. That makes it doubly important. But there's more. It's also rich in natural resources. Brazil has the second largest reserve of rare earth minerals after China. The U.S. has been trying to lessen its reliance on China for this critical resource. But by dominating Brazil and Vietnam, the CCP can influence about 80% of global rare earth minerals production. Another area is food production. Brazil is the largest soybean exporter in the world and the fourth largest food producer. The CCP has been making inroads into agribusiness, likely to secure food supplies for its mainland. But its strategies to gain control involve falsely claiming problems with Brazilian food, to later on buy them at bargain levels after prices lower.
China's going to be really seeking out and trying to get and acquire the access to food production. They would prefer to own the means of that production, a very mercantilistic way of looking at the world, but initially they'll buy and sell and have contracts with any new nation like Brazil. And eventually they'd want to be able to buy farmland and have access and produce it themselves so that they could have an assurance that they could get that food. They need that. So this is a vulnerability for China. A good administration that was paying attention would recognize that and use that as leverage in our negotiations with Brazil, but also to be able to show how we can use that against China to make sure that their bad behavior and their aggressiveness is held in check. It's called deterrence. We need to deter their actions. And one way to deter that is through strong alliances.
But Fontana notes when the Chinese regime comes in with investments, it often doesn't go well for the host country.
When China is bringing the workers, the loans of money from Chinese banks, we're going to be like slaves of China for a long time.
Beijing's infrastructure outreach policy, known as the Belt and Road Initiative, has also been dubbed debt trap diplomacy.
But it's also about this larger issue of freedom versus, we've talked about before, the slavery that comes with communism and what Chinese communists and the PRC stand for. And so we really don't want to see major countries like this, turn towards that kind of regime and that kind of philosophy and political ideology.
Given all that's at stake, what can be done?
It takes a whole of government approach on our end. It takes a leadership in Washington that's going to take the time to go down to South America, meet with the leaders there, have real negotiations, have real discussions, show real attention. It means to expand our presence in the sense of not in military force necessarily, but our presence in terms of saying that we're a reliable partner and how can we help you and how can you help us.
But that's not all. Fanell points out.
You need your diplomats there. You need, the free market capitalists need to be incentivized to go down there and trade. We have military relations, but we can expand those. And then we need to be talking with them about information warfare and strategic communications and what are the themes that are important to Brazil and America combined, and how can we promote those? But it takes trust. People have to trust us.
Fontana adds.
After the pandemic, the image of China, of the CCP, is worsening in South America, in Latin America in general. That's the moment when the United States should come and talk and negotiate, say, hey, I am your partner. I am your historical partner. It's not China. We are part of the same continent, right? We are the Americas, so let's work together.
Plus, according to Fontana, it's not just the U.S. helping Brazil. There's a major way Brazil can help the U.S.
Another point is drug cartels, as I told you before, are growing again, and this is bringing worries to the U.S. citizens. Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, Venezuela, and now Colombia are taken by the CCP. Brazil is the last patient in the region to help the U.S. to keep both the communism and drug cartels out of America.
Fontana explains at the end of the day, it's remembering which side stands for what.
We have the same purposes, we have the same ambitions, and we have the respect for freedom. That's the most important.
But as experts warn, if Americans and Washington continue to turn a blind eye, it won't just be the rising Chinese regime encircling the world. It'll be a direct threat on the daily lives of Americans in the United States. Crime will continue to rise, not just around the world, but here at home. But as experts add, it's not too late. There are options available, but time is running out. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Brazil is the biggest economy in South America, but it's also rich in natural resources. Among them are rare earth minerals. We hear from experts who break down what that means for the U.S. ally and why China is involved. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Apok TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you tomorrow.
The 2022 NTD 8th International Chinese Vocal Competition will be held from September 29th to October 2nd at the Merkin Hall of Kaufman Music Center in New York City. The competition is honored to have specially invited vocalists with the world-renowned Shen Yun Performing Arts to serve on its panel of judges. The Gold Award is $10,000. For more information, please visit vocal.ntdtv.com.